Hello and welcome back to the Argyle GC CLO Summit. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunskill with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. So just a couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator for this session. And to ask questions throughout this session and all sessions, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Natasha Walwyn Robinson, legal counsel at Splunk. We are so excited to have Natasha and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled The Changing Face of the GC CLL Role. Welcome, Natasha. Over to you.
Thanks, Vicki. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to be your moderator for this session. And without further ado, I'm going to jump right into introduction. So like Vicki said, my name is Natasha Walwyn Robinson. I'm legal counsel at Splunk. And to my right, Robin Diaz, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Natasha. And hello, everyone. I'm Robin Diaz. I'm the Chief Legal Officer for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I've been with St. Jude for 13 years, and I oversee the legal affairs, technology transfer, compliance, internal audit, and government affairs teams here. St. Jude is a specialized teaching hospital and degree granting institution based in Memphis, Tennessee. And we have affiliate locations in 8 other places in the South and Midwest, which contain St. Jude co-branded pediatric hematology oncology clinics. We focus on pediatric hematology, oncology, neurology, and infectious diseases. And we also have an international program focused on increasing cure rates in low and middle income countries. Happy to be here today.
Excellent. And next I have Kevin Mann. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, it's Kevin Mann with True Green out of Memphis, Tennessee. Also, just a little bit down the street from Robin. We're one of the largest lawn care companies. So if you call now, I can get you a special deal. I've been with True Green for a long time, 13, 14 years. Hopped around some across the country, working various national, international companies, and then started my career as a prosecutor in Phoenix. Did that for 12 years before I moved in-house. Glad to be here. Thank you, Natasha.
Wonderful. And Maria, last but not least, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Maria Feely. I'm the Chief Legal Officer and General Counsel of Washington and Lee University. It's a top 10 nationally ranked institution with a $2 billion endowment. Prior to that, I started my career at an AmLaw 100 firm. I was partner there for about 10 years now. It's now known as Troutman Pepper. After that, I became the Chief Legal Officer at Florida A&M University, one of the largest HBCUs in the country. And after that, I was the Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary at the University of Hartford, which is a school up in Connecticut with about 7 colleges, and has a D1 athletic program, which I had the opportunity to be the athletic director for 2 years.
Very cool. And what's so exciting about this panel is the variety and depth of the experience. And I'm hoping to learn a lot from you all today as we go through the questions. So my first question for you, I think I'm going to start with Maria, is one of the challenges, I'd say, or interesting parts of your roles, it seems, is just innovation and the different hats you play. So could you talk us through some of the ways that you and your role act as an innovator, as well as a strategist and a protector of sorts for your organization?
Sure. Working in higher ed was a big change from working in a corporate environment. Lot more meetings, a lot more process. So adjusting to that and understanding, the role of the GC is going to be unique to the organization. So learned about the business, the operations, and then built the relationships. And I think you'll hear this as a theme for me: relationship building. I find that is key to at least my success in any GC role that I've had so far. And once you build those relationships, then that can help you become more the strategist, the protector, the change innovator, because then you'll get invited into more meetings, and it won't just be when they think of a legal issue. They really will think of you as a business partner, strategist, somebody that can help them be a catalyst for what they're trying to achieve from the business side.
And I'm curious as well from you, Robin or Kevin, if you'd like to chime in on what being a change innovator looks like for your respective companies, and how are you able to effectively achieve that in your roles? Maybe Kevin?
Sure, like Maria, you'll hear a theme in my comments around really understanding and getting embedded, if you will, with the business. Because the legal skills you bring to the table, you're in law school or any place else, really are not going to be effective until you know what the client needs. And the only way to do that is, in my case, it's get in the truck with the specialist every once in a while to understand how they're doing their job, or to park myself in the branch and understand when I'm reviewing a contract or looking at a compliance issue, what to do to minimize the impact on the business and find innovative ways to bring about an effective result for the profit and loss, the side of the business. And I'm sure Robin's got some very similar things, knowing St. Jude's operations a little bit. So I'd be interested in your comments too, Robin.
Sure. Just building on what you've said, Kevin, and what Maria said, I think it's key to ensure that you have a seat at the table to demonstrate to the leadership team the value that's achieved by involving the CLO and legal in general early and often. You really have to emphasize that the legal department is focused on strategic guidance that promotes client objectives while achieving the mission, rather than issuing dictates. If they think that you're about issuing dictates or the dreaded Department of No, you will be excluded from those discussions, and that doesn't help anyone ultimately. One other thing that I'll add is I think there are opportunities for legal departments to be change innovators. So one example that I have is that my organization as a whole has diversity and inclusion goals. But in our larger organization of 6,000 plus employees, evidence of success can take time. And on the D&I front, I've been able to move the needle for my portion of the organization in concrete ways. So my legal department has achieved certification as a Mansfield Rule Law Department participant. That means we strive for a candidate pool consisting of at least 50% women, racial and ethnic minorities, LGBTQ plus attorneys, and lawyers with a disability for all senior departmental positions, external hiring, discretionary high visibility opportunities, and when hiring outside counsel. And we sought that because we really wanted to challenge ourselves to track our data and live up to metrics. And so now we have a majority female department with almost a third of our staff being racial minorities. And so that's one example of where, because I had, a somewhat smaller group than maybe some of the other leaders in the organization, I was able to lead the way in some respects and have some data that I can show to the rest of the organization and demonstrate ways that we can make our D&I goals work, ways that we can meet those goals.
Yes, working for one of the data leaders in technology, data is so important to having those persuasive conversations. So that is awesome to hear what you've been able to achieve in your role and the impact you've been able to drive. I am also very curious, because of the breadth of all of your roles and the different practice areas that come under your purview, how are you able to make strides when it comes to setting paths for compliance? What does the compliance plan at your organization look like? And what are some of the hiccups or challenges or learnings you've received from trying to implement a compliance program at your organization? And Kevin, I am going to start with you first, because I know this is one of your expertise areas. So if you could share a bit about what it looks like at TruGreen, that'd be very helpful.
Be glad to. It starts back when I was an assistant AG in Arizona, and I would come across in an investigation a particular company's compliance program. And when the outside lawyer would show up and wipe the dust off the book, I figured there was probably a problem that they might have had. And so as I stepped in the house, it really was understanding what the fundamental rules were. Obviously, what's the minimum you had to do? And then finding a way to connect with the business so that they wanted to pull it in. And so you find a way to connect it with respect to how the business needs to go into the marketplace and frame the plan in a sense of This will avoid you from being distracted down the road from your revenue generating activities. If you do the minimum X, Y, and Z, and we get an inquiry from a third party, EPA, Criminal Investigation Division, Department of Justice, Antitrust, state regulators, European Union, fill in the blank. When we have this, then I'm going to be able to handle this. You can continue with your business, and I can manage this appropriately and keep you from having to be distracted. So it was that framework first, and setting that up so that it maps to the federal sentencing guidelines as much as possible. And every organization will have scales with respect to how they need to manage that. If you're a highly regulated healthcare, finance, et cetera, different types of regulations you're going to have to comply with. And so you'll have a different burden to explain it to the business. Triggering, for example, is very regulated on a state and local basis with respect to pesticide and herbicide licensing, and also in the consumer affairs business. So we frame those plans in the terms of, all right, how are you going to keep the business focused on the business? And you're not asking me to run operations. You're asking me to minimize the risk of compliance. And so give me the authority to deal with it and frame it in a very clear, simple message as much as possible. And then to train to that and build out a communication method that is explains it. It can't be written by lawyers. So if you're writing your comms plan, you're doing the wrong thing. You pull in somebody from the communications team, marketing team to help you with your communication plan. And then do a check. Check in every once in a while, make sure the training is engaging. And once you frame that compliance plan that way, then you're invited into meetings because they, as Robin said, you're not the no department. You're not the, oh, you have to do this because. And that framework has been a very successful process for me. It helps, to have some of the war stories from being a prosecutor. That doesn't hurt either. Robin, I'd be curious. I would imagine in your space in the healthcare, it's a lot of work for you. So I think that a group would benefit from some of your own experience there.
Sure. Yeah, we're in a very heavily regulated environment, and we're also not to the extent that Maria is, but also in the higher ed world, which is very heavily regulated as well. So, we've just had to develop a robust compliance infrastructure that focuses on those segments that we're in. So we have a healthcare compliance group that one portion of it focuses on clinical and another portion focusing on research. We have an international compliance group, and then we have a higher ed compliance group. And so we don't shy away from risk, but we're regularly emphasizing that there has to be a risk management strategy and a conscious decision around how to approach risk. So are you accepting it? Are you transferring risk? Are you reducing risk? And one thing we've tried to do is more project-specific risk assessments, such that when a new significant project is contemplated, the legal and compliance teams are often working together with the business units to identify risks and mitigation strategies for those risks, and to help them strategize, rather than taking the traditional reactive legal approach where you wait for a problem to emerge and then try to clean it up.
And Maria, could you also chime in and your role and what compliance looks like? And you have both titles, really, right? GC and CLO. And what does that look like for you, as well as the governance side of things? I think is interesting as well. So if you could touch a bit on that, would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, higher ed is a highly regulated industry, from financial aid to waiting for new title regs that seem to come out with every change of the administration. So for me, I agree with everything my colleagues have said. Instead of repeating that, I'll say that, one thing that I've found is that when you step into a GC role, one of the obstacles can be not understanding the relationship that your office had with key stakeholders previously. So what relationship did your office have with the CFO? Because that's going to be a partner for you in creating a culture of compliance. And that goes along with my theme of relationship building, because if you don't come from a position of somebody that's a trusted advisor or somebody that is not seen as the no person. Getting your colleagues on board in the C-suite can be difficult. So from my perspective, an obstacle I've seen in the past has been either the legal office didn't have the relationship that it should have had with colleagues that it needs to work with, or it might not have been, person to person. It might not have been a connection between the CLO and the CFO, but maybe you've got somebody in a role outside of the legal office that, has been there for 30 years and has been through, 4 GCs and did see them, 25 years ago as the no office. So really doing the groundwork to build the relationships so that there is more of a willingness to see you as somebody that is going to help operations go more smoothly when, you're getting audited or when the DOE is knocking at your door for some reason.
Great point. Great point. What you inherit, right? When you come into the role and what you're able to do to turn things around or improve is very key. Great perspective. And I did want to pause because I think it is a great question that does relate to our conversation and leads me to a great segue to our next question, which is when you're trying to achieve alignment. That has been a common theme through all of your comments thus far with the business and the different ways and tactics you go about doing that. What are some key challenges? Lindsay Smith in the chat mentioned attrition. That can impact day-to-day work in your department. But overall, or broader than that issue, what are the things that you see or you encounter when trying to build alignment as a legal leader in your organizations? Robin, could you take a stab at that one for us?
Sure. I think one of the basic challenges that we come across is that our leaders sometimes fail to anticipate the extent to which legal or compliance considerations should factor into a project. And so a fairly obvious example that most lawyers would understand is, let's say a business wants to open an office in a new country, or perhaps even just allow employees to work from home offices in a new jurisdiction. There are going to be employment law, payroll, tax implications. And we find our leaders always so much want to be on the cutting edge of the medicine and science, but they don't necessarily think about those sorts of complexities. And so again, it's making sure that you're at the table and you hear about these things on the front end, rather than being in cleanup mode, which can be very messy and expensive. And then just transitioning a bit to the issue around retention and turnover. I think everyone's had a little bit of this challenge to one extent or another during the pandemic. One benefit that my team probably has is that they see a tie to the mission. And I think that's really key, is for the lawyers to see a tie to the business, to the significance of what you're doing, and to really care about that strategy and their role vis-a-vis the strategy, so that they don't just see themselves as transactional or working over to the side. What have we done when we've faced challenges where we're understaffed in a particular area? We've done some secondments. And those can work out, especially if it's with a firm that really knows your business, and can place someone relatively easily in your department. We've also used some alternative staffing firms for, so say overflow contract work, things that are relatively repeatable, so that we can get some of that volume off of the in-house team, and the in-house team can focus on some of the bigger issues. I don't know, Maria or Kevin, if you've dealt with that issue, retention challenges and how to deal with staffing.
Yeah, for me on the retention issue, everybody's got their own leadership style. I find that I have the most success when I am, more transparent with the people on my team, so that if they have aspirations to move up or do something different, it's better if I know that, because I'd rather not be blindsided by somebody leaving that's unhappy, because sometimes there's ways that I can help them. For example, in higher ed, there's a lot of JD preferred roles, for example. The entire Title IX industry is pretty much JD preferred, for example. Athletics compliance can be JD preferred. So I've had some luck if somebody is, looking to move up or gain another skill set, even instead of losing them 100%, I'm able to help them transition to another area that I oversee. And it creates some stability that way. But I don't ever want to see somebody staying in a role where they're not happy, because you're not going to get the best output from somebody that's not happy in their job. And I do find some of the lower levels, like the people in my office, that all they do is the contracts. The contracts that come through every day could be a $500 speaker contract or a software contract. I get that you don't want to do that for the next 25 years. So I think being realistic about, lawyers are professionals that might not want to do the same thing for 25 years, and working with people on that, and understanding how to help them, achieve their best goal at the same time by meeting your objections can be a good way to retain talent.
Great. And Kevin, I do want to hear from you, because you have a large employee base at True Green, relatively large, over 10,000, right? And
That's right.
how do you navigate all of that when you're trying to build alignment in such a large organization?
So I'll answer that part first. Because we get a fair amount of turnover in that frontline population. When you consider the nature of the job, you're showing up at 5:36, you're loading a truck with fertilizer, you're on somebody's yard, spraying, pulling a hose, pushing a spreader. And so that population can turn over if you don't scope the job right. And so this goes back to the question and minimizing attrition. Make sure you're talking about what the job is up front. That applies to the lawn specialist. It applies to, the roles inside my own department. If you aren't scoping the job right, such that you are hiring the right person to begin with, you're just asking yourself for attrition. And so that costs a lot to hire someone, train them, for them to turn around and say, I don't like this job, I'm going to someplace else. So, a routine hiring cost for a frontline role, training that person, that's $3,000-4,000. So you work up the spec right to begin with, and then your recruiters should be talking about the job in the right way. So when I apply that to roles in my own department, when we work up a job spec, I'm working very closely with the HR person, the hiring manager, to make sure we are defining the job spec as precisely and the scope as appropriately as possible, so that when we're talking to candidates, we actually know what we're talking about first, as opposed to it being the generic job spec that I created in 1982 while I was in high school in 82, so that doesn't count. So, because then that's not going to work. You're going to have people applying for the job. And then the other thing is to be patient. You might get 20 applicants, and it's going to be the 27th applicant that actually works, and you don't rush to fill the job. And then in terms of with Maria, I agree. We all have different leadership styles, and you don't adopt a leadership style that doesn't fit you, because you're just asking for a disaster. And I absolutely agree with her about being transparent. My team, very diverse team, in fact, mostly women. They know who I am. They know that I think differently than they do, and that's okay. And I expect healthy debate. When we're in a room, we will have some very heated conversations over both employee issues, culture issues, legal issues. But when we have wrapped up, we all understand each other, and then the business gets the right answer because of that, because we've all done that work ourselves. I've been very lucky. I've had very little attrition in my department. When I've had attrition, it's because, as Maria said, someone was ready for the next job and I couldn't give that to them. I didn't have it in either a budget or a development side. So I worked with them to, hey, if you want to find something else and you want to go someplace else, I'm going to help you find that job. And if I know that hiring manager at that company, I'm going to call them for you, because they'd be lucky to have you. And I've done that several times. And then that pays, because there will be others that will come back around and they're ready to move into a role that you have. So it works out very well. So attrition is something to be focused on, but it is very solvable.
Great points. And the authenticity piece really resonates with me. That's how I try to lead my team as well. And they know that when I'm talking to them, they're getting the real deal. and that's it. I do want to pivot a little bit though. So we are all lawyers here, right? So I am curious about just the different complexities in your respective roles in terms of the legal landscape. So it's a very broad question, but what are some of the preeminent issues or legal concerns you have that you are trying to navigate presently in your roles that come to mind? I know, again, speaking from the technology standpoint, and in particular my area with trademarks, there are a lot of cyber squatters that we have to deal with, for example, who are just taking our brand and doing all types of craziness on the internet. So trying to figure out how to deal with that. But maybe, Robin, do you have any complex legal issues that you're currently able to talk about and how you're going about navigating them?
So, you know, I feel like we deal with a little bit of what everyone deals with, in that I think we're all touched in some way right now by technology and how rapidly it's changing, artificial intelligence, lots of discussions right now about ChatGPT and how to deal with that. And I'm in a scientific culture. And so the strict answer of just shut it down and don't allow it until we figure some things out is not going to work in this culture. And so that's one example. But yes, I mean, we're also doing a lot of global work and working on entry into new markets. We do a lot of humanitarian based work in low and middle income countries. And so that's very, very interesting. And then health laws constantly changing. You know, we've been in a pandemic state for 3 years. We're actually still, I think we're the only industry now that is still under a vaccine mandate. Did not end with the public health emergency. And so we've had years of dealing with these COVID vaccine testing related issues, and those continue. And so just touching quickly upon a question that I saw in the chat about work-life balance, I don't have a great answer, but one thing that I have tried to do because of the complexity of our work is to set up practice groups within my team. And so each practice group has a leader. And so we have a practice group for employment law, for transactions, for claims and litigation, international law, higher ed, health law. And that's nice in that I know that there's someone developing leadership skills in that role and leading their practice group team meetings. But I also know that I'm developing team expertise in each of those areas because I can't do it all. I can't know the answer to every one of those complex issues. So that's one way to at least take some of that burden off of yourself.
Yeah, and Maria, I think of you when I see all this NIL stuff going on, and that's just one little piece of what you mentioned and you touched on about your role in athletics, but just again, in your area with higher education, what are some of the complexities you're facing on the legal side that may keep you up at night?
You know, it's funny. The things that keep me up at night are, please don't let one of our students die, right? Don't let there be a hazing, an alcohol, a drug issue, a DUI, a mental health crisis. But that's sort of on the micro level, and the macro level. Higher ed is sort of in the middle of everything right now. In fact, I'm actually glad I'm not down at Florida A&M University right now, because the landscape in Florida for higher ed is so rapidly changing. And so the issue is really back to basics. It's a free speech issue. What are you going to allow on your campus? Are you going to allow every speaker to come onto your campus? If you're a private institution, right, you have some different types of flexibility that a public institution doesn't have. If you're going to allow everybody in your campus, how are you going to handle the protests from your community, from your alums, from your donor base? So I never would have thought that free speech was going to be one of the focuses of what I deal with. But in the last couple of years, it really has. And that also has led to the need for the legal office to understand you're not practicing law in a vacuum, right? You have to be tied to the hip sometimes with your communications team. And you have to know how to deal with, I'll call it situation management. Hopefully it doesn't get to crisis management.
Totally. Wow. A lot of issues and things I didn't even think about that are really deep and heavy, but wow. Yeah, that's all I can really say about that. Kevin, and for you, I'm curious too, for you, what are some of the complexities in the legal work you're doing or your team is responsible for that apply to TruGreen?
Every day it's something different in terms of a consumer complaint, and maybe it's a claim that comes in and it's a damage to a species of something that you would never have thought you would have encountered. And so I'm going to take your question a little bit and I'm going to twist it. And only to help the audience understand, I don't know that it's the complexity of the question that matters as it is the approach you might take in order to solve it. And I'm not sure I've encountered any question so complex that the basic approach we all learned from the beginning, break it down, how does it apply to the business, what's the framework, and so that approach, simplifying it, has been successful for me. And I go back to the prosecution days. My ultimate audience was jurors that, there's all sorts of colloquialism you can make about the quality of jurors, but I trust them. But you had to simplify things for that process to work. And I just take that same approach with any of the complex issues. The first task I had to solve when I stepped in-house was a very complex audit around the international trafficking and arms regulation. I did not take that class in law school. I don't think they offered that, and nor did I encounter that as a prosecutor. So I had to pull the book out and understand it and try to solve the audit issues that we had, because we didn't have a compliance program for it. But once you got rid of all of those words and you broke down to what would be the behavior issues, then you solve it. So my suggestion for any of the group here is usually the simple approach works. Your business folks will understand that. And you deal with the complexity by pulling in the resources you need for those complex answers. Is there an expert here? Is there somebody in the business? And for us, that can apply to regulatory issues on a state and local basis, bans coming across with respect to how we do business and how you want to solve that, or the alternative products and everything else like that. But keeping the ultimate goal of what the business needs to get done as the forefront, and then applying just the simple method. Then most of the complex issues don't become that complex because you've got the team to solve it.
That's very, very helpful. And the recurring theme I'm hearing again is that you don't go it alone. While you have this, large responsibility, you do call on your team and you're open to learning and, like you said, not leaving common sense at the door, right? Trying to break things down and call on some of the training experience you had to help you with different issues. And to wrap up my prepared questions here, what do you see as the changing role or the future of the general counsel role or chief legal officer role? How do you see the shifting in coming years, and in what ways? So does anyone want to volunteer to answer that one? Or I can again pick on someone, but I think it's a great question too, because it's asking you to think, and put on your futurist hat about where you see your role. So yeah, anyone want to take a stab at that one?
Well, I'll start because I ended up doing a job I never thought I'd do because of the changing role. I think that sort of maybe the old school GC was seen as the stop sign office, right? The how to get to know. And I think that the office has evolved to try to be not the place where you go for no, but the place where you go to help you navigate and find the solution and be a catalyst to get where you want to go. And I think I've seen a shift from not just that to now, well, legal's good at problem solving. So any problem, even if it isn't necessarily legal, let's ask legal. And that turned into me becoming an athletic director. So not what I would recommend, but I think that's a good thing, right? When the CEO sees you as the person when there is a problem, legal can take care of it, as opposed to legal being, narrowly tailored to just dealing with the legal issues in a box, or certainly the antiquated way of being the person that's so risk adverse that the business people don't want to work with you. So I see legal evolving into a more holistic role where really not 100% of what you do is legal. Frankly, it is problem solving outside of legal. Now you get into a lot of privilege issues there, because a lot of what you do ends up not being privileged, but still you're adding a lot of value. And I think that's always a good thing.
Would echo Maria's comments 100%, because probably 60% of my job is not legal advice. It's working with the operators to help solve problems. You think about how lawyers are trained, it's the logical, analytical thought process, trying to eliminate the emotion from the process as much, which I'm very good at, fortunately. They call me the android in the office. And then applying those logical steps to the business problem solving aspect of it, and the interest that lawyers have in applying the data to the issue, which helps the decision process. So as Maria pointed out, the business comes to the law department when you have those factors in place, because they want help solving a problem. Then the next step, as Maria pointed out, is to make sure you are resourced appropriately to actually deal with those type of issues, because pretty soon all of your team is solving business problems. And then when the contracts come in for review, you're not staffed appropriately. So it's easy to say yes and then not be staffed. So that would be my other recommendation, is make sure you don't say yes too often without their head count.
I agree. I don't have a lot to add. I think, the GC or CLO of the current day and of the future has to be a member of the leadership team and be relied on to again, be at the table to discuss strategy. And I see that we have a number of questions in the chat, so maybe we should transition to those.
Yes, thank you so much. So let's see here. Any tips for becoming a better leader despite economic uncertainty?
So the tools I've used for years, is all of the feedback tools that your HR team can provide. So 360, Hogan's, all those things. The better you understand how you show up in your space, and how others perceive you, then you can manage that as appropriate. That doesn't mean you change who you are, but if I know I come across as non-empathetic and a bit curt, surprise, surprise, then I know that I need to manage that perception appropriately, be transparent about it. Then your team understands how you are as a leader, and they can be open to giving you feedback. So all of those HR tools that are out there, use them as frequently as makes sense, and trust the feedback. Don't say, no, that's not me, because they're actually very good tools. They're usually pretty insightful, and I'll give 85 to 90% accurate based upon the several I've taken.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, question 4. So are there any groups or sites or resources that you found useful in interacting with and learning from other GCs that you could share with the audience today?
I've been a big fan of creating my own groups. I seek out people that I am, I guess, a peer at other institutions, and we've created our own groups. We have regular meetings, and I think that works at any level, right? You could do it at the GC level. You could do it at the associate GC level, but having a group of peers that sort of organically grows, and that you can bounce things off of, pick up the phone, or talk about what are the issues that you're dealing with right now. And then there's always the industry groups, right? I'm sure that they're specific for each industry. Mine is specific for higher ed, but I found that the industry groups, at least for me in higher ed, have been great for communicating about issues that are facing GCs these days. And somebody that's dealing with the same issues that you is going to have better advice for you than a GC that's in a completely different industry.
Totally. Are there any particular names you can drop? I know for IP lawyers, you know, the American Association of IP Lawyers is a great one, or you know, the International Trademark Association. But are there any specific names you can drop for folks?
I can chime in. So in the health law world, the American Health Law Association is a big one, and they put on lots of conferences. And then there are companies that do programs that are really just geared towards GCs, and so it's primarily GC audiences. You know, sometimes with some law firm or alternative legal service providers there for business meetings, but there are the IPMIs and the Conseros of the world that put on programs focused on in-house lawyers, which I think can be a great resource for you to maybe be around people, some of whom are within your industry and some who are not. And you learn, I think, different things sometimes depending on whether you're talking to those inside your industry or outside your industry.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. And then Maria, in the higher ed world, there's NACUA, right? The National Association of College and University Attorneys.
Right. In fact, if any of you are going to be there, we have our annual conference at the end of June this week. It's going to be, we'll all be in Chicago.
And then, of course, there's the Association of Corporate Counsel, and they have a great annual meeting, which is usually in October.
Yeah, I've been an ACC member for a long time, and I always get my membership fee back in terms of either free CLE or, you know, their library is phenomenal, and it's a great networking opportunity because you can be very active in a local chapter and meet lots of folks. You can participate as a board member if you want on a local basis or a national basis. And I found that membership to be very valuable.
Nice plug for ACC. And the last question I see here is, what has been the most difficult transition for you as a legal leader or inside counsel that you've had to make in the past year? So any challenging transitions you've had to make in the past year as a legal leader?
Can't think of something in the past year that's specific to a transition. I know for all of us managing the hybrid work environment, but you know, I think that topic's been, I don't want to say, we've talked about it a lot. So I'm not sure I'm going to add anything new other than doing our best to embrace it. And my expectations might be different than somebody else on the team, and it's navigating that to make sure you understand what those expectations are, and then make sure you are aligning on what's best for the business. Curious if either Maria or Robin have had something else besides that topic.
The only thing I'll add is I think there's also there are changing work expectations even among lawyers, right? If you think about what you used to think it meant to be a lawyer, in terms of that work-life balance, what it meant in the law firm world versus in-house, and to what extent you were allowed to draw boundaries, and the world has changed, and even lawyers who are known as working long, hard hours, I think, draw boundaries in different ways now than we used to, and so that's just something that we're all getting accustomed to, and figuring out how we draw our own boundaries and how we respect the boundaries of others, right? There's this push to don't send emails on the weekend. You know, think about if you're someone who works at night, do you set the emails so that they get delivered in the morning, so that they don't bother people at night, or people don't feel pressured to respond at night. So it's those kinds of things where we have to rethink how we do things ourselves, and the impact that they have on our teams.
And I'll add, I don't think this is in the last year. I think it's ongoing, and it's going to continue to be ongoing. But, you know, understanding the importance of generational diversity in the workforce, because you know, you might have somebody that's been working there for 30 years and somebody's been working there for 30 days. and they don't understand the boundary issues, for example. So helping connect so that all the different generations can function in a way where they're not judging each other for having, the different types of, boundary issues, not wanting the emails on the weekends, not wanting them at night, and not saying that that's a bad thing. It's just different in helping the different generations within the workforce understand each other so that they can work well together.
Yeah, that is a very great point as well. And this concludes our session today. I want to thank all of our panelists so much for your time and for your insights. I've learned a lot and just happy to participate. And I'm going to turn it back over to Vicki. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Natasha, Robin, Maria, and Kevin. This was an insightful, excellent panel discussion. I think we could have done it ×2 because there could have been lots of good additional sharing. I'm sorry we're out of time. I want to thank everyone else for joining us today for this session. And this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thank you again to our fabulous panelists and moderator, and have a good time at the next session.